The sea was black glass when the first hints of dawn crept over the Pacific, a thin line of bruised orange on the horizon, where night surrendered. Reluctantly, Lieutenant Commander Ellis Warren stood on the starboard catwalk of USS Finback, his fingers curled around cold railing, watching that thin orange edge broaden into a band of molten gold. Dawn in the Pacific always carried a strange duality, beauty so absolute it almost felt cruel, contrasted by the knowledge that somewhere beyond those waters men were dying. Yet this morning, the calm felt heavier than usual, as if the ocean itself was holding its breath. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches, you make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. Behind him, the submarine hummed with restrained purpose. Diesel engines grumbled below decks as watchstanders whispered updates into red-lit compartments. The crew knew something significant was unfolding, though none had the full picture. Only Warren did, or at least the part Washington trusted him with. He reached into his pocket and pulled out the crumpled message dispatch he'd reread at least a dozen times overnight. A single page, typewritten, edges smoothed by anxious fingers. At the top, Operation Prism Lantern, Priority Ultra. Below that, a directive so stark and improbable he had almost laughed when he first read it. Intercept Japanese Task Unit 4 near the Western Caroline Islands. Document explosive damage signature from new warhead materials. Recovery of debris prioritized over engagement results. In simple terms, they wanted proof. Proof that this new filling, Torpex, was doing to Japanese steel what the scientists promised it would. Proof that American submarines and torpedo bombers were no longer lobbing underpowered firecrackers at the toughest navy afloat. Warren folded the page again, slid it back into his pocket, and inhaled deeply. He still wasn't used to how the Pacific smelled. Warm, faintly metallic, and endlessly empty. His thoughts drifted to the inspiration clip he'd watched before this patrol, the combat report that had circulated unofficially across the fleet, the story of German officers who had insisted artillery was unstoppable once the proximity fuse appeared, and Japanese pilots who, in 1942, counted a dozen American carriers before Washington began producing them by the hundred. Many dismissed those stories as morale fuel, but Warren had always understood their deeper message. Technology, once unleashed and truly understood, reshaped the battlefield more decisively than individual courage ever could. Torpex, the scientists insisted, was another one of those battlefield revolutions. He turned as footsteps approached behind him. It was Ensign Tobias Hale, his youngest torpedo officer, a lanky 22-year-old with brilliant blue eyes and the posture of a man who never knew where to put his hands. Morning report's ready, sir," Hale said, handing him a clipboard. "We'll reach the intercept point by 0900. Warren nodded, flipping through the sheets. "Any changes on the hydrophone patterns?" "Not yet. Ocean's quiet." Too quiet, Warren thought, though he kept that to himself. In war, silence was rarely peaceful. It usually meant the enemy was somewhere close, waiting. "And the new package?" Warren asked. Hale swallowed, his Adam's apple bobbing. "Secured. Torpex load. Mark the 4th. It's... well, the men have been talking about it." "Wait, talking how?" "Rumors, mostly. That it disintegrates armor, that it whistles before detonation, that it rattles bones. You know how it goes." Warren smirked. "Rumors keep sailors sane. Let them talk." Hale hesitated before leaning in slightly. "Sir, if you don't mind my asking, is it true? About Torpex, I mean." Warren studied the ensign for a long moment. He remembered himself at that age, hungry for understanding, yet afraid of how knowledge could harden the soul. He decided Hale deserved honesty. "It's stronger than TNT by almost 50%, Warren said. "More oxygen balance, more brisance, more penetration. When it goes off beneath a ship, it doesn't just blast. It lifts the hull, snaps keels, cracks armor." He paused, letting the words settle. "So yes, it's real." Hale nodded, but his eyes carried something between awe and fear. "Thank you, sir." As the young officer left, Warren turned back to the sea. He thought of the Japanese admirals, hard men with centuries of warrior tradition carved into their bones, standing on armored decks they believed were invincible, believing their plating, their welds, their watertight compartments could withstand any American torpedo. For years they had been right. American explosives lacked the sheer power to break ships designed by naval architects who studied storms and tsunamis as much as metallurgy. But Torpex changed that, and soon the ocean would write that truth in iron and fire. The first contact came at 0820. Chief Sonarman Dugan pressed his headset tighter against his skull, brow furrowed beneath red lights. "Skipper, I've got screws, multiple, slow cruising speed, bearing 270, long range." Warren entered the compartment immediately. Classification: 3 distinct clusters. Sounds like destroyers flanking something larger. Cadence suggests maybe cruisers or an escort carrier. "That matches intelligence," Warren muttered. "Bring us to periscope depth." Minutes later, the submarine rose silently through cold layers until the hull seemed to float within a muffled heartbeat of the surface. "Up, periscope," Warren ordered. The column rose with a soft, mechanical sigh. He placed his eye to the glass. The horizon shimmered, distorted by humidity, but shapes materialized slowly through pale morning haze. A destroyer on the left flank, slicing water with purposeful rhythm. Another on the right, trailing faint curls of white wake. And in the center, there she was, a modest carrier. Not enormous, but unmistakably Japanese, her forward flight deck glinting. Warren swept the periscope across her length, studying the profile, counting aircraft, estimating fuel stores. She wasn't a major capital ship, but she was armored enough to serve Washington's purpose. He lowered the scope. Wheel, shadow her. Plot intercept angle. The crew launched into controlled frenzy, bearings updated, depth adjusted. The submarine curved into a stalking position like a silent predator navigating moonlit shallows. But stealth alone wouldn't be enough today. They needed a blow so decisive that even distant Japanese command staff would feel the shock through reports, rumors, and whispered fears. They needed proof that Torpex could cripple armor the way scientists insisted. At 0910, Warren called Hale to the control room. "Load tube 1 with Torpex." Hale nodded sharply. "Aye, sir." The order passed like current through the ship, and in the torpedo room, sailors worked with methodical reverence. They had loaded countless weapons before, but none like this, even sealed inside steel casing. The warhead seemed to radiate something unsettling, an almost tangible pressure, as if the explosive inside resisted containment, yearning for release. When the loading was complete, Hale approached Warren. "Tube 1 reports ready." Warren exhaled slowly. "Set attack depth to 80 feet. "Aye, sir." The Finback slid downward, disappearing into deeper shade. Above, the Japanese formation moved steadily westward, unaware of the danger below. Inside the Japanese carrier, Yamashiro Maru, Captain Daichi Morimoto stood on his bridge, with one gloved hand resting lightly on the railing. The air smelled of lacquered wood and engine oil, a familiar, almost comforting scent. He gazed over the deck as aircraft crews prepared a scouting detachment, fueling engines and checking ordnance. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time. So if you're enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. A faint shiver ran through the steel beneath his boots. Not worry, just awareness. Morimoto knew the Americans were persistent hunters. Their submarines lurked everywhere. But he also trusted his ship's design. Japanese naval engineers had built their carriers with reinforced plating and meticulous compartmentalization. They could withstand torpedo attacks that would gut a lesser vessel. He had read the reports from 1942 and 1943, American torpedoes failing to detonate, running too deep, striking with the force of an angry fist rather than a killing blow. His officers often joked that the Americans had courage, but lacked craftsmanship. Yet, somewhere deep in Morimoto's mind, a quieter thought stirred. Americans learned quickly, and when they solved problems, they solved them thoroughly. He dismissed the thought, letting discipline override instinct. The horizon was calm, their escorts vigilant. He leaned over the operations map. "Launch recon at 0930, he instructed. "Yes, Captain," responded Lieutenant Hara. Morimoto turned toward the sea again, unaware that far below, an American periscope lens had memorized every line of his ship. By 0935, Warren had achieved perfect firing position. The carrier was turning slightly, but the angle was favorable, almost ideal. Destroyers flanked her at predictable distances, offering enough space for a submerged strike. "Target bearing 285, angle on bow starboard 20 degrees, Warren said. "Range?" Hale asked. 3,000 yards. "Closing." Hale's throat tightened. This was it. Warren looked around the silent control room. "All hands, prepare for firing." The words struck like a gong. "Set depth for detonation 10 feet below keel," Warren said softly. Hale blinked. "Sir, that's deeper than—" "That's the point," Warren replied. "You want to understand Torpex. Watch what it does to the belly of a warship." A tense hush settled. "Open bow caps." "Bow caps open," came the reply. Warren inhaled, eyes fixed on thin pencil lines crossing on the plotting table. He felt time slow. The sub hummed with energy. Metal, sweat, and adrenaline mixing in air too thin for comfort. "Fire tube 1. The torpedo slid out into the deep with a muted hiss, vanishing into the cold darkness. In the torpedo room, sailors held their breath. It wasn't superstition. It was reverence. They imagined the warhead slicing through shifting currents, propeller spinning like a whisper, nose hungry for impact. "Tube 1 fired, running hot," Hale reported. "Helm, come right 25 degrees, Warren ordered. "Take us down to 120 feet, quiet running." The Finback sank deeper, engines softening to low vibrations. The torpedo moved forward alone now, unseen but inevitable. Duggan counted under his breath while tracing sound waves. "Torpedo steady, passing 1,000 yards, 2,000... Above, on Yamashiro Maru, Morimoto felt the faintest tremor of unease. Nothing concrete, just the intuition of a man who had fought too long to trust tranquil horizons. He walked to the port side of the bridge, scanning the water for patterns in the waves. "Captain?" Lieutenant Hara asked carefully. Morimoto didn't answer the question. He only said, "Increase starboard lookout rotation. Something is unusual." Below the waves, the torpedo closed distance. "Impact in 10 seconds, Duggan whispered. The submarine seemed to freeze in time. Then, a muffled thunder rolled through the water, followed by a shockwave so violent it rattled plates and sent a tremor through every rib of the Finback. Even at depth, even at distance, the blow felt unnatural, sharper, deeper, heavier than any TNT detonation the crew had ever heard. In the control room, Warren steadied himself against a column. "Report," he snapped. Duggan's jaw went slack as he listened. "Sir, that wasn't a normal detonation. The echo is distorted. I'm hearing secondary structural failure, multiple collapses." Hale looked pale. "Meaning?" "It cracked her," Duggan whispered, "not just damaged. Something broke." On Yamashiro Maru, chaos erupted instantly. The entire midsection of the ship lifted, actually lifted, from the ocean as a column of white water punched it upward. Torpex didn't explode like TNT. It expanded violently, releasing gas pressure and shock in a ferocious bloom. The blast tore open the armored belly, snapping crossbeams, buckling bulkheads. Morimoto was thrown to the deck as alarms wailed. "Damage report," he shouted, struggling to his feet. Officers scrambled as smoke filled the bridge. "Captain, we have massive flooding in compartments 5 through 9, bulkheads shattered." Impossible, Morimoto thought. Bulkheads don't shatter. They bend, they deform, but they don't break outright. Engines failing, midships generators offline, fire crews overwhelmed. More voices shouted, "We're listing! 10 degrees increasing!" He gripped the railing, eyes wide with disbelief. How did one strike do this? He felt a coldness that had nothing to do with seawater beginning to flood decks far below. A truth rose inside him like an unwelcome ghost. The Americans have changed their weapons. Back aboard the Finback, Warren listened to Dugan's hydrophone feed as the Japanese carrier groaned, a deep, metallic howl of a ship whose spine had been snapped. "Destroyers are moving," Dugan warned. "They're angry, fast acceleration, coming right for us." Warren nodded. "All ahead 1/3, take us deeper." As the crew executed orders, Hale turned toward Warren. "Sir, Torpex did that." Warren looked at the young officer. "That was the future, Hale. That's what the Japanese will soon fear more than fleets or aircraft." He glanced at the ceiling as if he could see through steel to the ocean above. "Today," Warren said quietly, "we changed what armor means." And though the sea remained dark and indifferent, somewhere in the distance, a carrier screamed as water devoured her. The Pacific had witnessed hundreds of torpedo strikes since the war began, but this was different. This was a message no admiral could ignore. Night returned to the Pacific like a slow, black tide, swallowing the horizon and the last streaks of dying sunlight. By 0200 hours, the moon was a thin, pale curve behind mist, and the sea rolled in a steady, rhythmic swell. Lieutenant Commander Nathan Keller stood alone on the port catwalk of USS Hardpoint, the cool metal vibrating faintly under his boots. The submarine moved under battery power, silent, invisible, a drifting predator in a darkness so thick it seemed alive. Keller's hands rested on the cold railing as he studied the faint silhouette of the convoy they were stalking. The Japanese destroyer Kamikaze churned ahead of the formation, cutting arcs, searching for threats she would no longer understand. Behind her lumbered the transport, an older freighter converted for war, stacked with supply crates meant to restock outposts north of Truk. What mattered was not the cargo, but the escort. The convoy was behaving cautiously, as if they already sensed something new had entered the battlefield. Nathan exhaled, slowly. Not even their admirals knew. Inside the control room, red lights glowed over the navigation charts, casting the space in a low, blood-colored haze. Chief of the boat Harlan Ricks was pacing near the plotting table, thumb tracing the small burn mark on his belt where a welding spark had scorched it months earlier. Ricks had been a submariner since before Nathan graduated the academy. 52, broad-shouldered, deeply lined, an anchor of unbreakable calm. He looked up as Nathan entered. "She's zigging every 7 minutes," Ricks said, changing to an 8-mile sweep pattern. "They're nervous." "Good," Nathan replied. "Means we introduced ourselves properly." A brief smirk flickered across Rick's face. Torpex had that effect on Japanese captains. Word traveled fast. Rumors of ships destroyed by a single hit, of armor plates peeled back like tin foil, of American torpedoes that seemed to grow stronger in the water instead of weaker. Nathan glanced at the attack scope housing. The lens was covered, dark, waiting. "Range to convoy?" he asked. 4,000 yards, the sonar operator answered from his station, headphones pressed tight. "Lead destroyer slightly right of bearing. Engine steady." Lieutenant Maslow, the junior officer of the deck, tapped a pencil nervously against the chart. "Skipper, we're well within their depth pattern. If they pick us up—" "They won't," Nathan said. He lowered his voice. "Not tonight." His confidence wasn't arrogance. It was Torpex. Their new fish didn't need miracles, just a clear shot and a steady course. The Japanese destroyers still expected old Mark 14 performance, duds, premature detonations, shallow running. That was the old war. This was the new one. And they had no idea what was coming. Nathan pulled down the periscope handles and raised the attack scope. The lens broke the surface silently. slicing through the water like a needle. Through the glass, the world emerged in shades of blue-gray, the distant smear of the convoy, the destroyer's sharp bow wave, the faint glitter of a watchman's lantern. He whispered coordinates to the helmsman. "Steady. Come left 2 degrees. Hold." The submarine responded with the faintest shift, a subtle glide, like a shadow repositioning itself. Beside him, Rix leaned in. "2 fish?" "4," Nathan replied. "No mistakes tonight." Rix straightened, approving, but grave. "Aye, sir." He hesitated. Rare for the old man. "You know, Skipper, after what happened to the Okikaze," he said quietly, "word is the Japanese fleet is re-evaluating their armor designs. Admirals are saying nothing can stop your torpedoes." Nathan swallowed. It wasn't his torpedo. Not personally. But he understood what Rix meant. He had been the first in the squadron to fire Torpex in combat. He'd seen firsthand how the Japanese officers stared at the impossible wreckage collected from survivors. Whole decks collapsed, beams twisted, engines ripped clean from mounts. "It's not about fear," Nathan finally said. "It's about ending the war." Rix nodded. "Aye, that it is." Nathan turned back to the periscope. The destroyer's silhouette sharpened. "Perfect," he exhaled. "Open outer doors. Tubes 1 through 4. "Aye, sir. Opening outer doors." Metal clanked softly through the hull. "Set depth to 8 feet, Nathan said. "Goal is a hit under the forward magazine." Rix raised an eyebrow. "You want fireworks?" Nathan didn't smile. "Just making sure it stays down." He pressed his eye to the scope again. The destroyer was cutting across their bow exactly as expected, zigging into the slot like a piece moving on a game board he already solved. "Fire 1. The tube belched a muffled thump. "Fire 2. Another. "Fire 3. "Fire 4. 4 sleek torpedoes glided into the black water, propellers humming almost inaudibly. Torpex, heavier than TNT, more stable, more potent, waited inside them like bottled lightning. "Downscope," Nathan said. The lens slipped beneath the surface. In the sonar room, the operator straightened. Running. 4 contacts, all steady ahead." Maslow held his breath. The room felt suspended in time. Nathan's hand tightened around the edge of the chart table. Torpex worked. He knew it did. But war had a way of humbling certainty, he forcing himself to breathe evenly. Then the sonar man stiffened. "Contact. Target senses something." "Sir, destroyer increasing speed. She's accelerating." Nathan clenched his jaw. Too late for her. 3 seconds later, the ocean split open. A deep, violent roar shook the hull, distant yet unmistakable, like mountains collapsing underwater. Then a second blast, a third, the fourth was larger still, blooming upward into a shock wave that rattled utensils in the galley and made dust leap from the ceiling. "Good God," Maslow whispered. The sonar man adjusted his headset, eyes wide. "Sir, I'm losing structure sounds." Rix frowned. "Losing what?" "Her hull," the young operator said. "I can't hear her hull." "What do you hear?" Nathan asked. The operator swallowed. "Breaking apart, sir. Multiple fractures. There's nothing. Left. She's gone." The crew stared in silence. Even for submariners hardened by war, the sheer violence Torpex unleashed was sobering. Nathan closed his eyes. Another ship gone, another step toward ending it, but also another crew condemned to the deep. He forced the weight aside. That was a burden for later. "Helm," he said quietly. "Take us down to 350 feet, standard turn to port, let the convoy panic and run." "Aye, sir." The submarine descended into the colder layers, the pressure squeezing the hull with a familiar, tight groan. Nathan watched the depth gauge fall until the needle steadied. Hours later, after the convoy fled beyond reach, Hardpoint cruised silently west, engines humming in their long, steady rhythm. Most of the crew rested. The red lights had dimmed further, throwing the control room into deeper shadow. Nathan was in the wardroom, hunched over a map, spread across the small steel table, A mug of black coffee sat beside him, steam curling upward. He'd been awake too long, but sleep was impossible. Adrenaline still simmered under his skin. Rix entered quietly. "Skipper," he said, "message for you. Ultra intercept." Nathan straightened. "From Comsapac?" "No," Rix said. "From Naval Intelligence. High level." Nathan accepted the folded paper. He opened it and read the typed lines. His pulse quickened. The message described a recent Japanese Admiralty meeting. Captured radio chatter suggested senior officers were reeling. Reports of armor failures, catastrophic torpedo hits, and ships vanishing in seconds were creating a fracture inside the Imperial Navy. Enemy high command increasingly alarmed by new American explosive compound. Reports describe armor rendered ineffective. Japanese admirals demanding investigation. Nathan reread it twice. Rix leaned against the doorframe. "So they know." "Not what it is," Nathan said softly. "Not how it works. But they know something's changed." He set the message down. And for the first time that night, he felt a cold flicker of unease. "When an enemy realizes they're outmatched," he said quietly, "they act unpredictably." Rix nodded knowingly. "Cornered animals bite hardest." Nathan rubbed the tension from his neck. "We keep moving. Stick to the patrol route. Keep the crew sharp." Rix turned to leave, but paused. "Skipper, you ever think the war's shifting faster than we can keep up?" Nathan looked up, troubled. "All the time." The old man pushed off the frame and left Nathan alone, with the message fluttering gently under the air vent. For a moment, the submarine felt impossibly small, just a steel shell drifting through a vast, hostile world, carrying men whose lives depended on technology the enemy was now desperately trying to understand. By dawn, they reached a region of open water where the horizon stretched endlessly in every direction. The sun climbed slowly, turning the ocean surface into molten gold. The periscope cut a tiny ripple across the expanse. Nathan studied the far distance. Nothing. No masts, no smoke plumes, no shadows. "I'm thinking," Maslow said beside him, "that this quiet is the kind that happens right before something awful." Nathan lowered the periscope. "Or right before we find something that needs sinking." Maslow attempted a smile, but failed. "Sir, I heard the sonar boys talking. They said last night's hit was like dropping a battleship's worth of TNT into one torpedo." Nathan exhaled. "Close enough." "You ever worry what's going to happen when the Japanese figure out how?" Nathan shook his head. "They won't. Not in time." Maslow nodded, but remained uneasy. "Remember this," Nathan said. "Wars end because one side breaks, not when both sides learn all the same tricks." He signaled the crew. "Take her deeper. Standard patrol pattern." That afternoon, the ocean betrayed them. At 1540 hours, sonar picked up a faint rhythmic pulse, small at first, lost beneath the churn of distant swells, then louder, faster, mechanical. Rix rushed in. "Skipper, contact bearing 90, approaching at high speed." Nathan turned sharply. "Type, almost certainly a destroyer." "Alone," Rix hesitated. "Skipper, it's not one, it's three." Nathan stiffened. "Three? Closing formation, tight triangulation pattern. They know how to hunt subs." Maslow swallowed hard. "Sir, could it be intentional?" Nathan didn't answer immediately. He stared at the chart. 3 destroyers moving cooperatively. Triangulation. No convoy. "They're not escorting anything," he said finally. "They're hunting us." Rix murmured a curse. Nathan snapped into command mode. "Take us down to 400 feet. Silent running. Prepare to evade." "Aye, sir." The submarine descended again. Lights dimmed. Engines throttled to a whisper. Every man's heartbeat seemed to thump louder than the motors. The hull creaked under pressure. The sonar operator called out softly, "Multiple screws approaching. Bearing stable. Speed increasing." Nathan forced calm into his voice. "Helm, come right 10 degrees. Make no noise." Maslow hovered over the plot. "Skipper, if they bracket us—" "They won't," Nathan said. "We'll slip the gap." But the destroyers did something unexpected. They shifted, suddenly sharply, closing the formation around a single focal point. Rix froze. "Skipper, they know exactly where we are." "How?" Maslow whispered. Nathan didn't have an answer. Suddenly sonar blared in the operator's headphones. "Sir, object dropped! Multiple objects!" "Depth charges. Brace!" Nathan shouted. A cluster of charges detonated above them. The explosions hammered the hull, sending tools crashing from shelves and men sprawling across the deck. Lights flickered. Pipes rattled violently overhead. "Damage report," Nathan barked. "Minor leaks in aft compartment. Holding," came the reply. Another detonation. Closer. Another. The submarine groaned like a wounded creature. Nathan's pulse slammed through his veins. "They shouldn't know our depth this precisely," he muttered. "They're dropping right on top of us." Rix stared at him grimly. Someone talked. "No," Nathan said. "They don't know about Torpex, but they know something is out here that scares them." A fresh wave of charges fell directly above. The submarine lurched violently downward, metal screaming. Maslow cried out, gripping the chart table. "Sir, we can't take many more." Nathan grabbed the intercom. "All hands, prepare for emergency dive. Helm, take us to 500 feet. "Sir," Maslow hissed. 500? We hold," Nathan snapped. "Hardpoint was built to survive this." The submarine plunged deeper. The hull creaked dangerously. Cold water seeped in thin streams through welded seams. Then, silence. The explosion stopped. Sonar hummed quietly. Faint echoes fading in the distance. "Skipper," the operator whispered. "Destroyers slowing. They're circling. They're listening." Nathan's heart pounded. A hunt. A deliberate, coordinated, intelligent hunt. "They're not here by coincidence," Nathan said softly. "They came for us." Rix nodded slowly. "Sir, this is backlash." Nathan's jaw tightened. They had changed the war with Torpex, and now the enemy was changing with them. He straightened, steel-hard resolve returning. "Helm, rig for ultra-silent, level at 500 feet, not one sound, we outweight them." The submarine steadied. Outside, the destroyers lurked above, searching, listening, calculating. Inside, the men held their breath, suspended in a tension deeper than the ocean around them. Nathan stood in the center of the control room, sweat trickling down his spine, listening to the faint metallic pinging as enemy sonar probed the darkness. "We started something last night," he murmured. "Something they fear." Rix stared at the ceiling. "Aye, and they won't stop coming until they figure out what it is." Nathan didn't look away from the depth gauge. "They won't," he said softly. "They'll die trying." The submarine drifted silently through the black water as destroyers circled above like wolves. The war had changed, and every man aboard Hardpoint felt it. The destroyers lingered above Hardpoint for hours, circling, drifting, probing, like sharks scenting blood but unwilling to strike without certainty. Inside the submarine, time stretched into a suffocating, airless thing. The men lay still in their bunks or crouched beside consoles, listening for every faint click from sonar, every shift in hull pressure, every groan of steel under stress. At 500 feet, the water pressed on the vessel with relentless force. Even breathing sounded too loud. Lieutenant Commander Nathan Keller remained motionless between the chart table and the helmsman's station, his hands clasped behind his back so tightly they ached. He didn't dare move. Any noise could bloom upward into the listening ears of the enemy. The sonar operator leaned into his headphones, whispering updates as if afraid to offend the water itself. "Destroyer 1, drifting. Minimal screw movement. Destroyer 2, farther off. Maybe 1,200 yards. Destroyer 3, can't tell. Might be circling wider." Maslow swallowed loudly, too loudly, and winced at the sound. "Sir, how long can they keep this up?" "As long as they want," Nathan said without turning. "Fuel isn't their problem. Pride is." Chief Rix shifted carefully from one foot to the other. "We rattled them bad with that convoy strike. They're hunting ghosts. They think we're invincible," Nathan murmured. Let's not prove them wrong tonight. For a long while, there was nothing but the faint hum of machinery and the distant, rhythmic taps of enemy sonar pings. Ping, pause, ping. Soft but precise, searching, expectant. At 17:20 hours, the operator stiffened. Contact, Destroyer 1 powering up. A burst of engine vibrations surged into the deep. Maslow whispered, "They found us." "No," Nathan said sharply. "If they found us, we'd already be hearing charges priming." Rix folded his arms, eyes narrowing. "Then what are they doing?" The sonar man raised a finger for silence. "They're heading east, slow. Steady course. Destroyer 2, matching speed. Destroyer 3, also departing." Maslow blinked in disbelief. "They're leaving?" Rix didn't look convinced. "Could be a trick." Nathan studied the depth gauge, the angle of the hull, the stillness of the water around them. Every instinct screamed caution. But the pings, one by one, began to fade. At last the operator whispered, "They're out of range." A faint exhale rippled through the crew. Shoulders sagged, muscles uncoiled. Someone muttered a soft prayer. But Nathan remained stone still. "Helm," he said quietly. "Hold depth for another hour. No movement." Rix tilted his head. "Sir, if they're—" "No movement," Nathan repeated. Rix nodded. "Aye, sir." The hour passed agonizingly slowly. Men drifted into restless half-sleep. Others stared into the dim red lights with hollow eyes. The air grew warm, thick with breath and fear. At last, when the clock ticked past 18:20, Nathan stepped forward. "Bring her up to 300 feet, he ordered softly. Still silent. "Make it slow and even." The submarine ascended, whispering upward through the water layers, the hull crackling with temperature shifts. At 300 feet they paused. "Any contacts?" Nathan asked. The sonar operator adjusted the dials. "Negative, sir. Seas are clean." Nathan inhaled deeply. "Very well. Come to periscope depth." The ascent was delicate, painfully slow, but after 10 minutes the boat leveled. Nathan gripped the periscope handles and lifted the scope. A thin ripple formed around the lens as it broke the surface. He rotated slowly, scanning the horizon. Endless water, no ships, no smoke, no silhouettes, just the vast Pacific under a bruised twilight sky. "Clear," Nathan said, lowering the scope. Maslow slumped with relief. "We made it." Rix wiped a hand across his face. "Sir, those destroyers knew something. They were too coordinated." Nathan nodded grimly. "They were hunting us specifically." A chill passed through Maslow. "But how? There's no way they could know we'd be anywhere near that convoy." Rick said, "They could have tracked our last position near the Okikaze. Maybe they predicted?" "No." Nathan shook his head. "This wasn't guessing. This was purpose. They came because they're desperate." He tapped the message from Naval Intelligence still folded in his pocket. "Japanese admirals are panicking about Torpex," he murmured. "They're trying to find the source. They thought we were it." Maslow's eyes widened. "They assume the sub that hit the Okikaze is still in the region." "And that's us," Rick said. Nathan exhaled. "They're treating Hardpoint like a symbol, a threat, something that changes the war." He looked around the cramped control room. Sweating men, weary eyes, hands trembling slightly at stations. "They're right." When midnight approached, the sea calmed into a mirror-like black sheet. Stars reflected faintly off the surface, blurred by the gentle roll. Hardpoint cruised on the surface to recharge batteries, diesel engines, breaking the silence in steady, resonant bursts. Nathan stood on the bridge, the wind cold on his face, binoculars pressed to his eyes. Rick stood beside him, pipe clenched between his teeth though unlit. "You still thinking about them coming back?" Rix asked. Nathan scanned the starboard horizon. "They didn't fire at us before leaving." "That's what bothers me." Rix raised a brow. "Bothers you? I call that mercy." "Not mercy," Nathan said. "They left too soon, too cautiously, almost like they bumped into something they weren't expecting." Rix frowned. Meaning? Nathan lowered the binoculars. I don't know, but the Japanese Navy doesn't give up hunts that easily, especially not now. They remained silent for a minute, listening to the diesel engines thrum against the endless water. Then Rix cleared his throat. Skipper. The men are spooked. They're whispering about superweapons, about the Japanese experimenting with something new. Nathan exhaled. Rumors fill vacuum, facts erase them. Rix turned to face him. The older man's eyes were steady, unreadable. What are the facts? Nathan hesitated. He gazed out across the calm sea before answering. They're afraid of Torpex, he said finally. And fear makes enemies unpredictable. Rix nodded slowly. Aye, that it does. A faint splash echoed off the port bow, a flying fish breaking the surface. Minor, harmless. But Nathan's muscles tightened anyway. Everything felt too still. The next morning, the weather changed abruptly. A curtain of fog rolled in from the northwest, thick and white, swallowing the horizon within minutes. By 00:30, visibility dropped to barely a few hundred feet. Hardpoint cruised submerged, periscope depth careful and slow. In the control room, the atmosphere was taut. Sonar? Nathan asked. Nothing, sir, the operator said. Just interference from the fog layer. Nathan rubbed his forehead. Stay sharp. Fog makes blind men of everyone. Hours dragged by. Then, at 11:16, the sonar operator's head jerked up. Contact, bearing 310. Faint, but getting clearer. Maslow leaned toward him. What type of contact? The operator swallowed. Sounds like screws, medium prop, not military grade. Rix frowned. Fishing boat. Maybe, the sonar man said, but it's moving faster than any civilian boat should. Nathan stepped toward the periscope. Bring us up 10 feet, he ordered. The submarine adjusted. Nathan raised the scope, water sliding off the lens. Fog, grey, dense, endless. But there, through a break, the silhouette of a small vessel emerged. A junk-style fishing craft, weather-beaten, wooden hull. Nathan would have dismissed it except for one detail. The boat had no nets, no fishing gear, no lines cast, just a crew of 4, all staring outward as though searching. Odd, Nathan murmured. Maslow joined him. Sir, why would a fishing boat be alone this far out? Rix muttered. It ain't fishing, that's for damn sure. Nathan adjusted the magnification. One man on deck held binoculars, military pattern. Maslow whispered urgently. Sir, they're scouting. Nathan's jaw tensed. That's not a fisherman, that's an auxiliary patrol boat. He dropped the scope. Dive to 400 feet, now. Rix relayed the order. The submarine slid downward, but before they vanished completely, a faint metallic ping echoed through the water. Ping, ping, ping. Sonar. Not destroyer grade. Smaller. Closer. Nathan's pulse quickened. Helm! Faster! They descended. The pings intensified. Faster. Sharper. The auxiliary vessel was tracking them. Skipper! The sonar man cried. Additional contacts. 2 destroyers, bearing 325, approaching. The trap had closed. Maslow's voice cracked. They used the small boat as bait. And we took it, Nathan snapped. Prepare for emergency evasion. The destroyers roared into range. Fast, aggressive, purposeful. Rix gripped the railing. They planned this. They waited in the fog. Nathan's mind raced. 3 destroyers, hunting in formation, 2 days ago. Now, 2 more, closing. From the opposite side, someone in the Japanese Navy was coordinating aggressively, intelligently, and they weren't just hunting submarines. They were hunting hardpoint. The first depth charges hit within minutes. Distant thuds shook the water column. Then louder blasts. Then detonations close enough to rattle teeth. Damage? Nathan barked. Forward compartment stable, came the report. Minor leak starboard. Patching. Maslow clung to the chart table. Sir, they're bracketing us. I know, Nathan growled. His eyes flashed. Helm, hard right, 30 degrees. The submarine veered. Charges fell in a pattern, detonating above and behind, sending walls of pressure crashing against the hull. Nathan shouted over the roar, "They're guessing depth, we can break the pattern." But then the sonar operator screamed, "Sir, new contact below us." Nathan froze. "Below?" "Yes, sir." "Sounds like a submarine." Rix turned pale. "Japanese sub." The sonar man could barely speak. I think so. Diesel electric, maybe a row class." Maslow's breath hitched. "They're boxing us in." Nathan slammed the intercom. "All hands brace." A charge detonated so close, the hull rang like a cathedral bell. Pipes burst. A shower of sparks rained from the control panel. Men collapsed to the deck. Lights flickered. Alarms wailed. Nathan staggered, but stayed upright. "Helm! Reverse course. Take us down to 550. "Sir!" Maslow gasped. "The hull—" "Will hold," Nathan said through clenched teeth. "It has to." The submarine plunged lower. Pressure screamed against the steel, but the Japanese submarine below shifted, blocking them. Destroyers above closed in. They were trapped in a vertical vice. Maslow whispered, voice trembling, "Sir, what do we do?" Nathan stared at the depth gauge, brain racing, fear tightening around his throat like rope. And then, amid the deafening noise, the crushing water, the chaos, he felt something shift inside him. A thought, sharp, clear. "It's not us they're after," he murmured. "They don't care about sinking a sub." Rix blinked. "Then what?" "They want Torpex," Nathan said. "They want to know how we're doing this." Maslow whispered, horrified, "They're trying to capture us." Nathan nodded. Everything made sense. The careful patterns, the bait boat, the multi-layered hunt. "They're trying to force us to surface," he said. "Force us to surrender. They want the torpedoes intact." Rix spat. "That'll never happen." "No," Nathan said. "It won't." Another blast rocked the hull. The consoles flickered. A pipe burst, spraying steam. Nathan steadied himself. "We're not letting them board," he said quietly. "We're not letting Torpex fall into their hands." Maslow whispered, "Then how do we break out?" Nathan looked up, eyes fierce and resolute. "We do the one thing they don't expect." The submarine groaned under another impact. Nathan stepped toward the attack scope, gripping the handles with iron-hard certainty. "We attack the hunters." The men stared at him. "Sir?" Rix breathed. Nathan lowered the scope cap, jaw set like steel. "We fire Torpex at the destroyers while they're this close. Use the shock to break the trap. They think we're prey." His voice hardened. "We remind them we're wolves." The next morning broke over the Pacific like a blade of white light, slicing through mist and memory alike. The remnants of the previous night's shock still clung to the men aboard Yamashiro, as though welded into the steel itself. Every rivet seemed to hum with the echo of explosions that had torn open the water only hours before. Below deck, the air smelled faintly of smoke, oil, and something far older. Fear left to ferment in the dark. Admiral Shigeru Okada stood alone on the forecastle. His uniform cap hung at his side, fingers curling around its brim, as though he needed to anchor himself to something tangible. Behind him, the ship's catapults sat empty, their silhouettes like skeletons against the pale horizon. He replayed the detonations, behind closed eyes, the impossible pressure wave from a single American torpedo, the towering column of seawater, flinging debris 100 feet high, the way even thick armor belts shuddered as if struck by a divine hammer. Torpex, a word that tasted foreign, sharp, almost metallic. He had spent the night poring over intelligence reports, cross-referencing testimonies from submarine survivors rescued months ago. There, between redacted lines and half-buried details, he found hints, just hints, about the American explosive that burned hotter, detonated faster, and held inside it the brutal arithmetic of a changing war. Now, in the rising daylight, he felt the finality of it in his bones. Footsteps approached. Captain Morita joined him, posture formal, but eyes rimmed with exhaustion. "Admiral," Marita said quietly, "damage control reports are complete. Bulkheads held, but the engineers say the pressure from a Torpex detonation would have sheared them if the impact had been closer." Okada nodded. He had expected as much. "Captain," he replied, voice level, "we built this ship to withstand 15-inch shells from 50 cables, to resist a dozen torpedoes of the oxygen type. Yet one American weapon almost unmade us from 20,000 meters away." Marita swallowed hard. "What shall we tell the rest of the fleet?" "The truth," Okada said. "The time for illusions is over." He took a slow breath, straightening his cap, restoring the uniformed silhouette of an admiral, even if the man inside it now carried a weight heavier than steel. "Signal combined fleet," he said. "This war has changed, and unless we change with it, we will lose everything." As the sun climbed higher, bathing the ship in blinding gold, the Admiral felt the Pacific widen before him. Not as a battlefield, but as a reckoning long overdue. And somewhere beneath that glittering surface, American submarines prowled forward, their torpedoes armed with Torpex, patiently rewriting the fate of empires. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.